Park Min-seo kept hearing polite knocks at 3 a.m., while everyone else in the building chose to ignore them. Whoever was behind that door didn't shout, didn't break in. They only waited, again and again, until silence became a kind of cruelty. But when Min-seo finally looked closer, she uncovered a truth twisted by time and realized the warning had always been meant for her. But just wait until you see how this haunting turns on its head and why, in the end, justice came knocking too. Park Min-seo moved into Unit 708 on a Wednesday soaked in gray. The rain hadn't let up since dawn, pooling in the cracks of the Mapo side streets, drumming against taxi hoods, and streaking the windows of the narrow office she now called home. It was the kind of rain that didn't just fall, it lingered. Thick, steady, cleansing, like the city was trying to rinse itself of something. Min-seo didn't mind the weather. In some ways, it suited her. She hadn't told many people she was moving, not her colleagues at the publishing company, not even her cousin in Sangnam who always asked too many questions. She framed it to herself as a clean break. New apartment, new routines, new neighbors she wouldn't need to make eye contact with in the elevator. The kind of place where no one knew who you'd been the week before. Her unit, 708, sat at the far end of the 7th floor. The hallway outside was quiet, almost too quiet. A single emergency light hummed above the exit door. The air smelled faintly of kimchi jjigae, bleach, and something metallic that reminded her of old coins. Across from her door, Unit 707 was still wrapped in a realtor's ribbon, red with gold trim, curling slightly at the edges. No signs of life, no shoes outside, just a notice taped at eye level. Available. Contact Joe Realty. She unpacked slowly. A rice cooker, 2 mugs, a framed photo of her mother she wasn't sure she wanted to display. The building was old, with thin walls and an echo when she walked barefoot across the laminate floors. But the locks were new. Keypad entry, auto lock, and a heavy door chain she tested twice before going to bed. She lay down that first night without closing the curtains, letting the city lights flicker across her ceiling like distant headlights passing through fog. At exactly 3 a.m., 3 distinct knocks broke the silence. Min-seo's eyes opened at once, her breath caught somewhere between sleep and alarm. She hadn't imagined it. It wasn't loud, but it wasn't timid either. Each knock had the same weight, soft, deliberate, evenly spaced. Not the hurried pounding of someone in danger, not the lazy rhythm of a prank. It was polite, like a visitor who expected to be let in. She sat up slowly, heart tapping faster now. The room was cold, not winter cold, but still, unreasonably chilled for August. She slipped into her slippers and walked to the door without turning on the lights. The pee-hole showed nothing. The hallway was empty, bathed in the red glow of the exit sign at the end. No shadow near the door, no sound of retreating footsteps, just the ever-present hum of fluorescent lighting. Still, she kept staring, waiting to catch movement in the corner of her vision. Her eye began to sting from how long she stared. Her hand reached for the lock, then stopped. Her aunt's old voice echoed in her head, almost sing-song. Never open the door if you hear knocking at night. If it's real, they'll call. If it's not, you don't want to find out. A rural superstition, the kind she'd laughed at as a child. But now, alone in this unfamiliar building, in a hallway that felt too still, the words crawled back with weight. She slid the chain into place before unlocking the main bolt and cracked the door open, just 2 centimeters. Just enough to hear, to see, to breathe in the air beyond. Nothing. No footsteps, no movement, no whisper of clothing. Only silence. Thick and deliberate, like someone holding their breath just out of sight. She closed the door, locked it again, and stood there for a long time, listening. Then she laughed under her breath, short, flat. Probably someone drunk, wrong floor. It happened. She told herself that again while brushing her teeth with a trembling wrist. Told herself again while double-checking the windows. Told herself again while lying down, eyes fixed on the front door, watching it from the edge of her blanket like it might move on its own. The next morning, she stopped at the front desk on her way out.
The building's security guard, a gray-haired ajushi with thick glasses and a kind, weathered face, looked up from his newspaper. She asked casually, trying not to sound nervous, "Excuse me, do you know if someone's moved into 707 yet?" 707? He rubbed his chin. "No, not yet, I think. Why?" "Ah, just heard something last night," she said quickly, waving it off. The ajushi handed her a small cardboard box from the delivery shelf. "People get drunk and press the wrong doors, especially after midnight. Happens more than you'd think. Don't open unless you know them." He said it like a routine warning, something he'd repeated to other tenants, something that wasn't unusual. Still, it didn't sit right. That evening, she placed a post-it on the inside of her door before bed. A silly idea, but it gave her a strange sense of control. She wrote, "Please stop knocking. I have work in the morning." She folded it and slid it gently under the door, halfway sticking out. Then she checked the chain again, turned off the lights, and crawled into bed with her phone nearby. The clock ticked past midnight, then 1 o'clock, then 2:35. At 3 a.m. sharp, 3 knocks. Same rhythm, same spacing, no anger, no urgency. Like an appointment being kept, like a promise. She didn't move. She stared at the door from her bed, barely breathing, eyes wide in the dark. Her ears strained for the sound of retreating steps. None came. She forced herself to get up 20 minutes later, slipped on her slippers, walked slowly to the door. The post-it was gone. She knelt and checked. It wasn't stuck to the threshold, wasn't caught in the shoe cabinet, wasn't folded in the corners. Gone. The hallway, when she peeked through the pee-hole, looked untouched, silent, sterile. The floor was freshly mopped. The red ribbon on Unit 707 fluttered slightly, even though the air vents weren't running. She told herself the cleaning ajushi probably swept it away. That made sense. It had to. Still, her hands shook as she poured her coffee that morning. She didn't call anyone, didn't message friends. She didn't want to explain why she suddenly wanted to hear her mother's voice, or why she hesitated before stepping into her shoes. That afternoon, she bought a heavier chain and installed it herself. That night, she went to bed with the hallway light on, her phone screen facing the door, and her eyes wide open. She didn't plan to sleep. She planned to wait. For 3 a.m.
By Friday afternoon, Min-seo's nerves had grown thin from silence. The days passed like they weren't fully real. Her work meetings blurred, food had no taste. Even the steady rhythm of the subway felt distant. The knocks hadn't come during the day, and neither had any answers. So at lunch, she called the realtor. Her voice sounded casual, breezy, like someone politely curious, like someone definitely not afraid. "Hi, just wondering, has someone moved into 707 yet?" A pause. The agent on the other end replied, "We're still showing it. No one signed the lease. Why? Did you hear something?" Min-seo hesitated. "Oh, no, just wondered. Would you like us to schedule a showing for someone you know?" "No, it's fine." She hung up. The screen dimmed to black. Her own reflection stared back. That night, the air in her apartment felt different, heavier. Not cold, just thick, like the kind of pressure before a summer storm, only there were no clouds. Just fluorescent lights and her thin white curtains barely moving. At 2:30 a.m., she took her phone, propped it carefully on a shoebox facing the front door, and opened the default camera app. She switched it to video, pressed record, and sat cross-legged on the floor. The lens captured the entrance, the strip of shadow beneath the door, and part of the wall leading to the kitchen. At 2:59, she muted her K-drama and closed the laptop, letting the blue light fade. A part of her already knew something would happen. Her body knew before her thoughts did. The way her breathing had shifted. The way her hand hovered near her phone's flashlight icon without pressing it. She wasn't scared of a person exactly. She was scared of the moment when she would have to prove it hadn't just been in her head. At exactly 3 a.m., 3 knocks. Sharp, measured, almost courteous. Each one rang clear in the quiet, like punctuation marks on a sentence she didn't understand. Min-seo didn't move. The camera kept recording. She counted 5 seconds, then 10. Then, again. Not just another knock. This time it sounded different, heavier.
Not knuckles, but the flat of a palm. A thud against wood, like someone testing the surface. Closer somehow, closer to her. She reached out and stopped the recording with stiff fingers. The silence that followed was louder than the knocks had been. She rewound the footage and plugged in her earphones, trying not to shake as she listened. She scrubbed forward to the 2:59 mark and waited. The knocks were there, just as she'd heard. But then, just after the first set, a second sound. Almost identical, but fainter and out of sync. A soft, barely there triple tap that didn't line up with the others. Like an echo, but not from the hallway. It was coming from inside the apartment. She pulled the earbuds out. The sensation that her skin was too tight settled over her like static. She glanced left, toward the broom closet near the shoe cabinet. Then right, where the wall met the bathroom. She stood slowly, checking the lock again even though she knew it hadn't moved. The camera had picked up something her own ears hadn't. That was what made it worse. She slept barely, with her back to the couch cushions and the living room light on. Her phone sat charging on the floor, still within reach. Every few minutes, she checked the hallway through the peephole. Nothing. Just the steady hum of the corridor's lights and the soft hum of someone else's air conditioner above her. By morning, she tried to laugh it off. She even told herself she might have imagined the second sound. Until she opened her shoe cabinet to grab a fresh mask. There, near the bottom, almost pinned behind her sandals, was the postage she'd slid under the door 2 nights ago. The note that had vanished. She knelt slowly, reaching for it. The edges were wrinkled, the ink slightly smudged, but it was hers. Her handwriting, her words. Please stop knocking. I have work. She hadn't opened that cabinet since Tuesday. Her stomach turned. Not in a dramatic way, more like the slow, creeping unease of realizing your keys are not where you left them, even though no one else has been in the house. In the elevator that morning, she ran into Choi Junho from 7-Eleven. He was holding a bag of trash and wearing a hoodie with his company's logo on the sleeve. Trying to keep her voice light, Min-seo said, "Hey, has anyone else said anything about weird noises at night?" He raised an eyebrow. Weird how? Just knocking, around 3 a.m. Junho chuckled. Maybe the building ghost is saying hello. She smiled weakly. Don't worry, he added. Pipes in these places do weird things. Sounds jump. You hear something from the 5th floor, and it feels like it's right behind your ear. She nodded, grateful for the explanation, even if it didn't help. At the front desk, the ajushi was halfway through his morning instant coffee. When she asked about the CCTV footage, he rubbed his eyes and said, "Let me check." He clicked through a few screens, frowning. No one was there, he said. But what? The feed froze, just for a few minutes, around 2:59 to 3:04. System glitch. It happens sometimes. He didn't look directly at her. When he did, it was for a moment too long. If anyone bothers you, just press 0 on your intercom. I'll come up. Min-seo thanked him, but his voice didn't sound like his own. That evening, after a dinner she barely touched, her phone buzzed with a message from a name she hadn't seen in months. Kang Tai-han. Are you sleeping better these days? She stared at the text. No context, no hi, just that. It felt too on the nose, like he somehow knew. She started to type, deleted your number for a reason, then erased it and closed the app. She didn't respond. She didn't delete the message either. At 2:50 a.m., she was still awake, sitting on the couch with her legs tucked under her and the hallway light off for the first time in 3 nights. She told herself she wouldn't record this time. No cameras, no notes. Just her and the silence. At 2:58, the elevator dinged. Her apartment was at the far end of the hallway. She never heard the elevator at night. She stood up. At 3:00 exactly, the 3 knocks came again. Same rhythm. But this time, something changed. Just as she held her breath, not daring to move, she heard it. A voice. A whisper. No louder than someone breathing. Not through the door, not from the hallway. From beneath the door. And it said her name. Min-seo. Not angry. Not pleading. Just there. like someone reminding her they existed. She didn't scream, didn't move. She just stood frozen until her knees began to ache. When she finally lay down, it was on the couch. The bedroom felt too far, too unguarded. The living room light stayed on. Her phone was still on the floor. The air felt thinner now, like her apartment was no longer just hers. She didn't remember falling asleep, but she remembered waking. The low hum of the Ajushi's morning radio filtered through the floorboards at dawn. Static-filled trot music and an old man's voice reading the news. That sound used to make her feel comforted. Today, it just made her feel late, like someone had already missed something, like someone had been waiting for her and was getting closer.
By Saturday, Park Min-seo's world had narrowed into 2 time zones: the ordinary hours, emails, street noise, delivery men, and the space between 2:59 and 3:04 a.m., where logic dissolved and something else waited. She didn't want to feel foolish. She wanted answers. So that afternoon, she stopped by the front desk with a polite smile and a box of mochi donuts from the bakery 2 blocks away. "I brought these for you," she said as she placed the box down. The Ajushi blinked behind his glasses, surprised. "Oh, for me? I was wondering if, maybe, I could look at the CCTV footage from 2 nights ago, just for a few minutes." He hesitated. She kept her voice light. "It's silly, just want to check something. You said there was a glitch." The guard gave a long sigh and nodded, motioning for her to come around the desk. Behind the counter, the old monitor displayed 4 angles in black and white: the elevator, the stairwell, the main entrance, and the hallway outside her unit. He moved the mouse with deliberate slowness and scrolled through the footage. "There it is," he said after a few clicks. "Timeline stops at 02:59:58. Doesn't resume until 03:04:12. Min-seo leaned in. The feed cut off smoothly. 1 frame blinked to the next, then silence. No error message, no static, just absence. "Network hiccup," the Ajushi muttered, a little too quickly. "We've asked the security company to fix it. Happens sometimes." "Can you go back?" she asked, "to right before it cuts?" He clicked. The hallway appeared in stark grayscale. Her floor, her door, the empty corridor lit by the emergency lights. Min-seo's door was just a pale rectangle. Nothing moved. For a moment, she thought maybe this would help. Maybe she wanted it to show nothing. But then, 1 frame, 1 single frame, not even a second. The image changed. The camera had shifted angle, not by its own rotation, but as if someone had leaned close, their face nearly pressed to the lens. In that instant, the screen caught it. A woman's eye, wide, still, watching. Not a stranger's eye, her own. She gasped and took half a step back. The Ajushi clicked, startled. The frame vanished, back to static hallway, back to the timestamp. He frowned. "That's probably a reflection. The lens sometimes catches light from—" "It was my eye," she whispered, "but I wasn't there." He didn't answer. She studied him for a moment longer, but his expression had gone flat again, neutral, official. The same way people look at you when they've already decided what to believe. Min-seo thanked him and left the mochi donuts behind. That evening, she stood in the corner store for 20 minutes, staring at the shelves of household goods. She bought salt. Not the expensive kind, just a paper pouch of coarse gray sea salt. She also picked up a 10-pack of plain white envelopes. Her grandmother used to put salt in envelopes and tape them above doorways. For cleansing, she'd say, for the spaces between things, places where air hesitates. Min-seo had never believed in such rituals, but now rituals felt like instructions, and she needed something to follow. Back home, she poured a clean, thin line of salt across the threshold of her apartment. Not a dramatic one, just enough to mark the edge between inside and out. Then, self-conscious, she swept half of it away with her foot, just in case the Ajushi passed by, just in case she was wrong, just in case. At 3 a.m., the knocks came again. 3. Polite, familiar. She didn't move. She didn't breathe.
The air in the apartment dropped in temperature, enough that she could see her own exhale hang briefly in front of her mouth. Her hands gripped the blanket on her lap, holding it like armor. Then, behind the door, a different sound. Water. Running. Not a trickle, but not a burst. The quiet hiss of something open. A faucet. A pipe. A wet sound that did not belong in the hallway. Then, softer than the knocks, a scrape. Not metal, not wood. Like fingernails dragging slowly across the surface of the door. And then, just audible beneath the scrape, her name, Min-seo. Not shouted, not even spoken, just written. Spoken with intent, not with voice. She pressed her hand to her mouth. Her eyes welled, not from sadness, but from the body's instinct to protect itself when something wrong enters the room. The kind of tears your nerves make when fear has no place to go. She texted someone she hadn't reached out to in months. Yoon Hae-jin. Can you sleep over tonight? Please. The reply came quickly. Of course. Way. Want me to bring snacks? Hae-jin arrived within an hour, dragging an overnight bag and wearing a bright hoodie that said Paju Theater Club 2023. She was always too loud for the hallways, but Min-seo didn't stop her. I brought banana milk, she said, plopping onto the floor, and honey daughter chips. You okay? Min-seo nodded. Just weird noises at night, like bugs, like knocking. Hae-jin rolled her eyes playfully. So we're haunted now? They laughed. It helped. At 2:55, they made instant ramen in the kitchen, slurping it while crouched on the floor like college students. Hae-jin talked loudly about her new script. They laughed again. It almost felt normal. Until 3 a.m. The knocks came, right on time. 3 of them. Hae-jin froze, mid-sentence. They both stared at the door. Who is it? Hae-jin called out, her voice higher than usual. Silence. See? She whispered. Could be a prank. We should open. No. There was a stillness behind the door, but not emptiness. Pressure, like someone was standing right there, listening. Then, again, 3 knocks. But this time, the sound landed beside them. Not on the door center, but right near the edge. Right next to Hae-jin was crouched. She jumped backward, knocking the ramen pot off the floor. Broth splashed onto the linoleum, steam rising instantly. The smoke detector didn't go off. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was thinner now, like a thread about to snap. Then, nothing. The presence behind the door seemed to pull back, fade, dissolve. Hae-jin got up without saying a word and began cleaning the spilled broth with shaking hands. They didn't talk much after that. Hae-jin slept on the couch with her shoes on and the light still burning. Min-seo stayed near the window, half listening for footsteps that never came. In the morning, Hae-jin left early for a rehearsal, promising to check in later. Her text came at 10:12 a.m. Cheer up. It's probably nothing. People use stairwells at night. Noise travels. You just need more sleep. Min-seo didn't reply. She stared at the message for a long time before closing the app. Her mouth still tasted faintly of metal, not from the ramen, from something else, something she couldn't name, something that was learning the shape of her name, and the rhythm of her breath, and the sound her footsteps made on hollow floors, something that had waited last night, not to be invited in, but to be recognized.
By Monday morning, Park Min-seo's body no longer felt like her own. Every movement seemed delayed, as if her muscles were processing time differently. Her eyes were raw from too many nights of interrupted sleep, and her voice had taken on a softer edge, the kind people used when speaking to themselves. She took personal leave from work with a single-sentence email. I'm dealing with a safety concern in my apartment. Back soon. She didn't expect a reply. She didn't wait for one. Instead, she rode the elevator down with her coat unbuttoned and her phone clutched like a lifeline. The building's silence followed her, stretching from her unit into the lobby like something attached. At the district office, the locksmith technician wore a blue vest and a distracted expression. He looked at her digital lock, then scanned his tablet. "We can replace the cylinder inside," he said, tapping with a stylus. "That'll block old key cards, even if someone duplicated yours. But the keypad model," he tapped it lightly, "this one's standard. There's no unique encryption. If someone else happens to have the same unit, theoretically, they could punch in the same code." "No one else has my code," she said too quickly. He didn't challenge her, just nodded and wrote something down. Min-seo didn't tell him the original passcode was her birthday, something she thought she'd never forget. That day had meant comfort once, but now she changed it to a sequence only she would recognize. A date tied to shame, a date she never said aloud, a date she should have let vanish. The technician tested the new lock twice. It beeped green, it was done. But she didn't feel safer. Not even close. On the way back upstairs, she stopped at the small real estate office next to the lobby. It was one of those offices you barely notice. White blinds, a plastic orchid by the window, a calendar flipped a month behind. The woman inside recognized her immediately. Min-seo stepped in and asked in her usual polite tone, "Why does the listing for 707 now say available from next quarter? I thought it was immediate move-in." The agent's smile faltered. "The owner's reconsidering," she said carefully. "Something about wanting to renovate." Min-seo narrowed her eyes. "But I saw it listed as ready 3 weeks ago." The woman hesitated, then leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. "There was a small incident, years ago. Not anything serious, no structural damage." "What kind of incident?" "The tenant got locked out," the agent said, "at night. There was a gas leak in his unit. He didn't have his phone, and, well, he tried knocking on neighbors' doors, asking for help." Min-seo didn't blink. No one answered? They thought it was a prank. College students live here. People keep to themselves. She gave a small, apologetic shrug. "By the time someone called the fire department." She didn't finish. "We upgraded the alarms after that," she added quickly. "It's safe now. You're safe." Min-seo swallowed. "What was his name?" The agent looked uncomfortable, but opened a thin folder behind the desk. She flipped through tenant records, names highlighted in marker. She said at last, "Yoon Ji-won." The name felt like a tuning fork struck deep inside her. It reverberated, not in her ears, but in the hallway of her mind. Familiar. Already there, as if it had been waiting for her to find it. She thanked the agent and left. When she returned upstairs, everything felt too quiet. The hallway carpet had been vacuumed recently, but the scent of cleaning solution only made the stillness feel worse, like something had been scrubbed away, not dirt, but memory. She bent to place her flats into the shoe cabinet. Inside, a single paper square clung to the wood like it had grown there. A post-it. Damp. Warped. Her handwriting. "Please stop knocking. I have work." She stared at it unmoving. The ink had bled slightly, the words blurred like veins in bruised skin. The note smelled faintly, just faintly, of something chemical and wrong. Something that lives in stovepipes and safety manuals. Not strong enough to be real, just enough to remind. She touched the edge of the paper, and her fingertip came away cold. That night, she didn't wait for 3 a.m. to come to her. At 2:30, she went down to the lobby again. The ajushi was there, stirring instant coffee into a paper cup. He didn't look surprised to see her, just tired. "I want to check the hallway footage," she said. He didn't answer immediately. Then, slowly, he turned the monitor around. They watched together. The hallway appeared as it always did, sterile, dim, the walls pale and repeating. Nothing happened at first. But then, at 02:59:42, something shifted. Not a person, not a shadow exactly. More like a subtraction from the light.
Something slid forward in the frame, slow, human-shaped, but not fully human, as if the camera itself refused to focus on it. The pixels stuttered, edges blurred, her door came into view. Then the audio kicked in, low, broken. From the grainy speaker came 3 uneven knocks. Then, without warning, the door opened a sliver. From the outside, they watched the image of Min-seo herself, her own shoulder, the edge of her black sweatshirt, her hand, on the chain. But she didn't remember getting up, didn't remember undoing the lock, didn't remember standing there. She said something. "That's not me," she whispered. The ajushi reached forward and closed the video window. His hands were shaking. "Sometimes the lens picks up reflections," he said, pressing his palms flat against the desk. "You said not to open the door at 3. He said nothing. Back upstairs, she didn't pace. She didn't write notes. She didn't press record. She stood at the door at 2:59 a.m. and waited, one hand resting on the new lock. The hallway lights flickered once, then steadied. At 3 o'clock, the knocks came, exactly as before. 3 of them, polite, patient. This time, she undid the lock. This time, she slid the chain off. Because sometimes fear isn't the thing that stops you. Sometimes fear needs resolution, needs proof. She opened the door. The corridor exhaled cold air into her face, like a breath she had never noticed was being held. No one was there. The exit sign buzzed softly in its red glow. Far below, in the belly of the building, a water pipe shrieked once, an ugly sound, raw and metal. She stepped into the hallway barefoot. The concrete was cold beneath her soles. "Jiwansi," she called. Her voice sounded far away, smaller than she expected. The walls swallowed it. No reply. Just the hallway, repeating itself. She turned back toward her open door. That's when she heard it. 3 knocks. From inside. She froze. Her door, which had stood ajar behind her, began to swing shut. Not slammed, just pulled, gently, as if guided by unseen hands. She lunged, catching the edge with her palm. The surface was cold, colder than the hallway. It bit into her skin. Then, through the peephole, on the inside of her own door, she saw movement. An eye, watching her. Her own. The door opened wider. Nothing inside had changed. Her slippers, the coat rack, the soft hum of the refrigerator. Except a single wet footprint marked the threshold, facing the wrong way, pointing into the apartment, not toward the door, not toward escape, but return. She didn't step inside right away. She stood in the hallway, unsure if she was the one looking in, or the one who had just been let out.
On Tuesday night, Park Min-seo no longer bothered pretending she might sleep. Sleep was a luxury for people who still believed their apartments were just rooms, not reflections. She turned off every unnecessary light, leaving only the floor lamp near the window, a single weak circle of yellow trying to hold back the dark. She stacked books in front of the door, more out of instinct than strategy. Thick anthologies of poetry, a 2-volume Korean dictionary, an old hardcover with pressed flowers between the pages. Objects meant to hold language, now guarding silence. She sat beside them on the floor, a coat draped over her knees, phone face down by her ankle, waiting. She thought of the man from the realtor's story, Yoon Ji-won, who had knocked and knocked while a building full of neighbors chose not to answer. Not out of cruelty, just disbelief, fatigue, a shared illusion that nothing bad really happens if you don't open the door. She thought about the CCTV footage, the single impossible frame, her own eyes staring from outside her own apartment, the shape of her shoulder, the edge of her sweatshirt, a version of herself pressed into a timeline she couldn't access. And she thought about this building, about the sameness of it. The doors that all looked like hers. The walls that echoed back your own footsteps a half-second late. The narrow corridors that felt longer every time you walked down them. A place designed to repeat. A structure built for looping. At 2:56 a.m., her phone buzzed. Just once. No ringtone, no vibration, just a quiet pulse of light across the floorboards. She picked it up. The message read, "Are you awake?" No name, no context. Her first instinct was to reply, "Who is this?" But then the sender field caught her eye. 010-XX-XX, her own number. She checked it twice. The digits were identical, not similar, exact. The phone slipped from her fingers and skittered under the shoe rack with a soft, traitorous noise. She crawled after it, hands searching blindly. Instead of plastic, her fingertips touched paper. Soft, damp, familiar. It was the Post-it. The same one she'd slid under the door days ago. The ink was smudged from moisture, her handwriting barely legible, but still there. "Please, stop knocking. I have work." She didn't remember putting it there, didn't remember keeping it, but it had followed her. Or maybe she had been the one following it. At 3 a.m., a sharp chirp split the silence. The building's fire alarm. Only once, like a voice clearing its throat. Then, nothing. The hallway lights dimmed suddenly, dipped just enough to trigger instinct, then stabilized again, humming low. Then came the sound she now knew by heart. 3 knocks. Not aggressive, not afraid, just expected. She stood slowly, knees stiff, breath tight in her ribs. Her hand hovered near the door. The knob felt cold, colder than it should be. She didn't open it. Not this time. She pressed her lips close to the seam between door and frame and whispered, "Who are you?" For a moment, no reply. Then, from the other side, a voice answered. Her own. Warped by distance, cracked like a warped recording. "Me." A beat passed. Then the smell arrived. Faint, but unmistakable. Chemical. Unnatural. Mercaptan. Her chest tightened. She turned toward the kitchen instinctively and saw the stove. The front left knob had shifted. Not enough to light, just enough to leak. The burner she hadn't touched since Hai-Jin's visit was slightly off-center, hissing softly like a whisper in water. Her thoughts splintered, then rearranged. The knocks weren't a threat. They were a warning. She lunged, flicking the knob shut, then yanked the window open with wet hands. The latch fought her for a moment. Her fingers slipped. She pulled harder. The frame gave. Cold night air rushed in. The apartment exhaled like lungs that had forgotten how. But before relief could settle, one final knock. Closer. Not on the door. Inside. Like two bones meeting. She turned back. And suddenly she knew. Not logically, not from evidence, but with the full weight of a truth that had always been there. The knocks were not coming from a stranger. They had never belonged to someone moving in. They came from a fixed point in time, a point she hadn't lived through yet, a point she was rapidly approaching. A night where she was trapped behind the same door, lungs burning, pounding for help, while others slept, while the building held its breath, while her own past self mistook her for a ghost. She had become the knock. She had become the echo, a closed loop of plea and warning and silence. She backed away from the stove, toward the front door again. Her hand touched the wood. "Don't open," she whispered to herself. And somewhere in the corridor, the building answered. The elevator dinged. She glanced at the floor display. B3. No such level existed. She had checked. But now it blinked steadily. B3, B3, B3. Then, slam. Somewhere below, a door, followed by the groan of metal pipes. No, not pipes. The building itself. Exhaling like an animal stirred from sleep. She opened the door and stepped into the hallway, not out of bravery, but because the inside no longer felt safer. The corridor was wrong, longer, wider.
The exit sign flickered in and out like a dying eye. Across from her, the ribbon on 707 fluttered violently, though there was no draft. She pounded on it, on 709, on the metal door to the stairwell. "Wake up," she shouted. She didn't know if she was warning them or begging them. The line blurred. The sound of her own knuckles, sharp, desperate, reminded her of something. A man she had never met. A version of herself she hadn't become yet. Her voice cracked. "Please, someone." No one answered. The air around her grew thick, coppery. The hallway didn't just feel longer. It felt deeper, like it was tilting. She turned back to her own unit. And through the peephole, movement. Someone inside. A figure approaching the door from within. Familiar, not just in shape, but in rhythm, in posture. Her outline. But reversed. As if the mirror had stepped forward. She didn't reach for the knob. She didn't need to. 3 knocks. From inside, from outside, from both. Her hand lifted. Not by decision, by instinct. As if repeating a sequence long practiced, rehearsed in dreams she couldn't recall. She knocked. Once. Twice. 3 times. And in that small, precise act, she understood. The 3 a.m. neighbor was not a stranger, was never meant to be. It was always her, calling out, being ignored, becoming the echo, not haunting the building, but held by it, folded between floors, trapped in the seam between warning and forgetting, between opening and regret, between too soon and too late. When the fire trucks arrived at 3:11 a.m., the lobby guard could offer no answers. The elevator was frozen, the cameras were down, but the hallway reeked faintly of mercaptan, despite no trace of fire. They checked every unit, filed reports, spoke quietly in the stairwell. The real estate agent took the ribbon down from 707. A week later, she put it back up again. Someone asked Choi Jun-ho about the woman in 708. He shrugged. She moved out. Or maybe she never moved in. I forget. People say things like that when the details don't fit. When silence is easier than explanation. And somewhere, in the dim hours that belong to the building itself, 3 a.m. arrives again. A door waits. A hallway breathes. 3 knocks. Soft. Polite. Exactly on time. And if anyone is awake enough to listen, really listen, they might hear a voice through the seam in the wood. Not a stranger's voice, their own, saying, "Me," and understand, too late, that the apartment has never had a new neighbor. It has had a future, one that knocks, and waits, and remembers, even when no one else does.